Hello, welcome to Dissident Canada. My name is Tyler. As promised yesterday, I would talk about the war for the control of the global financial system that appears to be happening with the Trump administration. And it's quite fascinating. I'm still not sure how well it will work because you're dealing with banks, and banks are I wouldn't say the one, but one of the hardest industries to control because they can just offshore stuff to subsidiaries outside of their control, in which they can do some really, really shady shit, such as what is known as rehypothecation, which is using one piece of collateral more than once. So, just real simple. Instead of using, say, a mortgage to guarantee, a $500,000 loan, okay, you can do that multiple times. There's the whole shadow banking system has tier lists and how much you can rehypothecate certain pieces of collateral. The most right now is like 20. So yeah, that means you have 20 loans backed up by one piece of collateral. So if you run into a monetary problem or you get a velocity issue, you get real freaking problems. Anyways, I'm just pointing out that whatever the Genius Act is trying to do, you're trying to do it to really smart and really shady people. So don't expect it to go one-to-one how you expect it. The best laid plans are broken by banks. Let's just put it that way. Anyways, Genius Act. All right, this is the Stablecoin Act in the United States that regulates stablecoins, promotes them, and puts them in a very dominant position on the world stage. So, and it really is a play for dollar supremacy, even though it's not really dollar supremacy, it's treasury supremacy. Um, I think this is coming from either Besant or whoever is backing Besant, because everybody's got backing, all right? And they want to control or have a larger share, okay, of the Eurodollar system under their control. And the way they're doing this it is kind of twofold. They're forcing what's in the shadows out into the open, and they are starving the shadow banks in a sense. It's fascinating. So the way they're doing, what they're bringing out into the open is they're bringing dollar accounts, all right, on stablecoin. Either they're on its own blockchain or some other crypto's blockchain, because both do work. Like, I think it's USDC has its own blockchain, but the stablecoin, is also on. It's like Ethereum, Polygon, it's Polygon, and a few others. So it's very interesting because it's. But, anyways, so what that does is all the ledgers are public, so the accounts are known, and the amount of dollars or dollar-backed stablecoins or dollar asset-backed stablecoins is available to the public. So what that does, if you're promoting stablecoins, all right, you're regulating them, you're allowing banks to use them, which you want to, and you're encouraging it, all right. You put their bank accounts publicly available, which is so much easier to track, because then you don't have to deal with shenanigans of, say, what happens now, where if you say wanted to sanction China for some reason, all right, you have to not only sanction the is it the PBOC? Yeah, it's the PBOC, uh, which is their central bank. You have to get their central bank accounts, all right. You have to freeze them, and then you also have to sanction the proxy bank accounts that exist. So, very famously, there's one in Belgium where China is currently buying a whole bunch of US bonds. Basically, they're just moving their bonds from domestic holdings over there, is what's happening. They're selling for dollars in China, and then they are taking whatever else they have in assets, liquidating it, and buying bonds in Belgium. It's very simple. Um, so now, with stablecoins, you've got a very easable, trackable, traceable. This is what the issue with people who say that the stablecoins are central bank digital currencies. They're not. They're different. They are not exhibiting that amount of control. It could change at some time in the future, but that hasn't happened. So you can still warn about it. Just don't be crazy to be like, well, it's already here. It's a central bank digital currency. Fuck off. Fuck off. Um. Anyways, so now all the counts traceable, trackable, and it's very easy to see. It's a very interesting control mechanism, and there's been a theory about crypto from basically the beginning that the reason crypto was created, it was created by intelligence agencies to sucker in people that are harder to track, and you could track and trace them because the ledgers are public. I'm not entirely in on that theory, but it is a very fun theory to play with. So, your first half, you're ripping stuff out of the shadows into the light. That's fine and dandy. But where it gets real interesting is the regulations on the stablecoins. They're regulated like a pseudo bank. All right. So what these stablecoin issuers are going to have to do is they're going to have to buy a whole whack ton, especially as it grows, because the idea of a stablecoin is that it's backed 1-to-1 to the price of the dollar via dollar assets, so that should you, the holder of a stablecoin, sell it off, you get your dollar back. That's great. It's like pegging to gold, but less difficult in today's age. So what this means is they have to buy a whole bunch of dollar assets. So that one props up any dollar asset out there. And second, because the transactions have to happen very quickly, they have to be liquid assets. So I would presume in the future, at some point, these stablecoin issuers are going to likely have large supplies of gold, just because there's very little counterparty risk. But also, as they grow and as they are promoted and as crypto grows, because again, that's kind of the point of the Stablecoin Act, is to promote the growth of crypto, to get people into these stablecoins and to get countries into these stablecoins. Although, just a little sidetrack, there's already a large country that is very much in dollar stablecoins, and that's Russia. You can transact fairly well with certain Russians with stablecoins, and all throughout the world, really. I've heard numerous anecdotes of being like, hey, yeah, I want, I'm in this non-advanced economic country. I want to do business with you. Let's do it through dollar stablecoins, which is very interesting there. So, anyways, where was I going with this? As you try to get countries hooked on this, these banks are going to, or these pseudo banks, these stablecoin issuers are going to need dollar assets, and they're going to have to be fairly liquid. So you're going to have like corporate junk bonds probably go up in price, yields go down. That's how that works with all types of bonds, and dollar denominated bonds. So there's a few countries that do this every once in a while. Canada recently did this. The UK did this also under Mark Carney. Kind of interesting there. Is it Aramco or Amco? Also does this regularly. The UAE has also issued dollar denominated bonds. But other than those, there's also other countries and corporations that have done it. But the biggest one in the pool is US dollar bonds issued by the Treasury, sold at auction by the Federal Reserve. So what this does from the prospect of sovereignty, it does a lot of things. Seeing as US dollar bonds are the global base layer of the monetary system. If you want to operate in the global financial system in any way, shape, or form, you are going to need dollar bonds, because that is the backing if you want to get US dollars as it stands right now. So these stablecoin issuers, pseudo banks, are going to have a lot of those bonds on paper on their balance sheet to match up with the increase in usage and dollar stablecoins. So what that does is a lot of things. One, it onshores your dollar debt. So you're no longer paying hostile countries such as China in dollars. You're cutting them off from you paying them back, and you are also cutting them off from the base layer of the monetary system. And the new layer, the stable coin, is controlled by the United States. So you have a situation where you starve countries and banks, and if they want to operate, they have to play by your game. This is a massive play for sovereignty and hegemony. Like, this will take the dollar back into the hands of the American people to a certain extent. Obviously, these are private corporations, but private corporations regulated by the Fed, the SEC, and the president at large is going to have a massive amount of control over this. So voting does matter at some point. So it's really interesting to think this through, because for the last 20 years, okay, when treasuries don't flow correctly, banks don't do the collateralized lending that they've been doing, you get what Jeff Snyder calls Eurodollar events. Vary in scale. Like, you have 2008, which is like the first. Then you have the sovereign debt crisis in 2011. You have 14 is number 3. Number 4 is 2018, and then 5, I think, is 2021. 2023 is another one, and I believe we're going into another one. So there's been a few of them from Jeff Snyder's perspective, which, if you don't understand that, I really go check out Snyder and all his work. Anyway, so you get these hiccups throughout the rest of the system because there's something going on in the shadow banks. So you take the control out of these shadow banks, hand it back, to America. Let's just say that in general, the hegemon, the controller of the dollar asset, and dollar as in general. So you can get a whole lot of problems. Like you could have Eurodollar banks outright fail if, again, you're going to have dollar stablecoins take off. Like the Genius Act wasn't talking about the immediate future and say the next few years. It was a play for, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the line if crypto continues to grow, so that these stable coins grow, so that the stablecoin issuers continue to suck up dollar assets out of the available market from these hostile banks. Because what these banks do is devalue the dollar because it suits them and they need it to be cheaper. And it forces the Fed, all right, and the US Treasury into positions where if they want the globalization and they want the hegemony, they want to be top dog, they have to go around and use their wealth on other nations. Because otherwise, like, you just get, America gets wrecked and they have to rebuild from basically like no manufacturing base or very little manufacturing base. This way, you get extremely, how would I put this? You get an extreme degree of control over the global currency. All right, because again, there's so much dollar debt floating around, and the capital controls on the dollar are so non-existent. It is like the perfect reserve currency and will be for a fairly long time, no matter what BRICS does, because that's just a bunch of highly untrustworthy nations, again, from the eyes of the banks, not whatever, especially when it comes to capital controls. Like, Russia's never going to give up its sovereignty in, bringing rates down to zero so that foreign banks can lend in rupees. And China's not doing that either. Like, at no point is the communist going to give up control over their domestic monetary system. Look at how the PBOC has spent, the last 20 years almost, trying to peg the yuan to the dollar at a very narrow range of like it's like 7.1 to like 7.15, something like that, or it's like, maybe it's 7.4. It's extremely pegged. Like, there's very little divergence. Hong Kong does the same thing, same with Taiwan. So, but like, they have a certain degree amount of control because they want that. Um, uh, India, nobody's gonna get really involved that much in India. Like, you can look at the Indian growing market, and it's very much like the Chinese market, where sure, you can probably get good returns, but it's not sustainable long term. And people are going to, in quick order, once you hit a certain point, uh, reevaluate India, like they're going to reevaluate China. Um, I think the investment flows from, like, the way it's working right now, or it seems to be shaping up, or from what I can see. Let's just put it that way. Um, the Chinese investment from foreigners is going to dry up and shift to India for a time, but when that no longer looks like it's going to be the gold mine that China was, or what they think it will be, like, they'll all pile on and they'll all make a whole bunch of money, don't get me wrong, but they're going to see serious freaking problems, and then they'll move on to another market, and just carve and hollow out countries. It's what they do. They don't know how to build. But besides all that, so the dollar really can't be challenged because there's nobody out there that has a viable alternative at this point with a robust network of um like you need clearinghouses, you need all these really uh, like they do extremely niche things for banks that banks don't do themselves, and you need to do it in such volume that nobody really else can, and nobody's really thinking about it. I did mention the other day that like BRICS is kind of getting on that direction, and that's fine and dandy for them. But like Gazprom still has USD, what is it, USDT and USDC? Like they're still transacting in fucking dollars in a roundabout way. Like, come on now. Russia, who has basically been cut off, is still transacting in dollars. China, who hates America at this point because the Donald is actually going to economic war with them. He's not doing the greatest job, but they still buy U.S. treasuries and haven't slowed down. India's extremely pissed. They've been selling treasuries for a while now, but that's because they're trying to get dollars, not because they hate America. They are like the world is run on dollars. It's like the world is run on oil. Like finance is dollars. If you don't have dollars, you're kind of SOL. If you have no way to get dollars, you're really SOL. On the global stage. Yes, I understand that BRICS is having small amounts of transactions between state-owned entities in local currencies. Whoop-de-doo. Do you know what that accounts for? Next to nothing in the global financial system. Like, you're talking about at any given one point in time, any second, there is at least 100, if not $200 trillion that is moving through the system. Yeah, it's that big, all right? And that's just euro dollars. That's stuff that the United States can't really see because it's all shadow banking. But you move that into the light, and the United States can control it. And again, you onshore the base layer of the global financial system into American hands. You starve out the current iteration of the Eurodollar system, and you force them on to these highly visible transaction paths, which you regulate and control. This is what London banks did, except they created the shadow system. All right? They controlled it for a time, all right, in the early days, and then it eventually moved into regulatory regions such as, the Cayman Islands and such. The UAE, specifically Dubai, is trying to, or up until the Genius Act, was trying to become the new Eurodollar hub. At the Genius Act come and basically kills that. Like this is a massive dominance play that I'm trying to think. I've been trying to think through all the ramifications if this goes well, and I can't get close to what I even think is half because it's such a big network, and there's such small little minutia in the large network that you have to really think through. Like, does this destroy the Cayman Islands? Because the only reason the Cayman Islands is basically anything close to a sovereign nation is because of their banking cartels, or just their banks. But those banks are going to have run into serious issues because of this the Genius Act and this massive hegemonic play. Do these banks now become subservient to the United States in some way? Or do they just go defunct? Same thing with the London banking cartel. Do they get broken finally after hundreds of years? Do the Swiss banks run into more issues than they've been running into recently? Does like Monaco have issues? Like you're talking about extreme degrees of control over the financial system in nations that have been relatively hostile to the United States. And if you think, for example, that England hasn't been hostile to the United States, you're out of your mind. Who created the Steele dossier and handed that shit over to Hillary Clinton, and then they laundered it? That was the British. Who helped lie to get Iraq started? That was the British. Who brought the Americans into Vietnam? That was the French and the British. Yeah, so you are getting serious control out of hostile nations. Now, this could all absolutely backfire on the United States, or it could come to nothing. But the scenario in which it backfires is that the United States would have to be a viable alternative to the United States dollar as a world reserve currency. And it's not so much that it's the dollar, it's the euro dollar system. It's the shadow banks that are the reserve currency in reality. But if you're taking control of that from them, and there's no viable alternative, again, they're playing by your rules. You have massive control. Now, it does force countries to get smarter, such as, the Russians. You're playing chicken with some of the best grandmasters on earth. So always keep that in mind when you do a hegemonic play. Anyways, that's the video for today. Tomorrow, I believe I will talk about some good shit that is happening around the world, because haven't done that in a while. And there's some actually really interesting good things going around. One has to deal with Robert F. Kennedy, who continues to be the best part of the Trump administration. You cannot change my mind on that. Kennedy is the best part. Then you have... Actually, you know what? I'm not going to rank them. Anyways, the other topic is going to have to deal with the raising of the colors that is happening over in the UK and Australia, and how that is extremely good. Now, I see some issues with it, but that is the video for tomorrow. Until then, have a good day.